Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, observations from the first two games in Vegas. The rookies have been impressive. The defense has been swarming. Some other standard roster guys, young veterans from the Wolves roster, if you will, have been really impressive. We'll talk about it all on the show here today. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, and the playoffs are over for every sport at this point, we're on to just baseball, WNBA. That's all that's happening right now. The sports stop sportsing like they want them to this time of summer. But throughout the summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Monday, everybody, and hopefully you had a fantastic weekend. The Timberwolves are 2-0 in Las Vegas Summer League, a couple of impressive wins, and it's weird. Like usually Summer League, well, we'll get into it. It certainly is disjointed at time because it is, after all, Summer League, but a lot of positives for the Timberwolves through the first two games. That's what we're going to do today, is kind of unpack both together. Not a typical post-game pod that we do during the season. We're not going to go blow by blow or do real studs and duds necessarily at this point because I'm covering two games at once. I just want to give overall observations. And I guess maybe we do, I don't know that I'll use the stud and dud language, but I'll talk about specific skills and players that impressed me the most, the best things about the first two games, and then a couple of things that, like to see be a little bit better over the final 2 to 4 games, depending on how many they end up playing in Vegas. So we'll get to all that here today. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. All right. So in Vegas, the Timberwolves played on Friday afternoon, and they beat the New Orleans Pelicans by 7 points, 81-74. On Sunday afternoon, they beat the Pacers by 11. Both these games were pretty back and forth. They were close. Each team led by right around 10, 12 points, and then the Wolves ended up pulling away at the end in both cases. And like I said a minute ago, what I'll do today is we'll just kind of look at the body of work, if you will, over the two games and what really stands out the most. And really, it's pretty much going to I'm pretty much going to end up going player by player because I think that's the best way to evaluate Summer League. Overall, I would say that the most impressive team thing, which again is a little bit weird because we're talking about this group of like 10 guys that are playing in each game. Yeah, 10 guys have seen the floor in each game, the same 10 guys. They get a week of practice together. And this is the only time these 10 guys are ever going to play together. And in contrast to last season, we talked about this last week. Last year, the Timberwolves, there was hardly anybody playing in Summer League there was nobody that was going to play rotation minutes for the Wolves. We saw Leonard Miller last summer. We saw Josh Minott. We saw Wendell Moore Jr. last season. Of course, he was traded this offseason. So, but it was nobody that was going to see rotation minutes for the Timberwolves. It was just a bunch of undrafted guys, a bunch of G League guys. Now, this year, the starting lineup in G League are 5 guys who are going to be on the Timberwolves roster this year. And at least 2, if not 3 of them, are going to be rotation players. Obviously, Rob Dillingham, the Wolves traded up and picked him at 8. He's going to be in the rotation. Both Terrence Shannon and Josh Minott have a shot. We talked about this last week. Both have a shot at being, call it the 10th man in the rotation. I think they both made a pretty solid case. And by the way, so is Jaylen Clark. We'll get to him too. So that's just the starting lineup. And then off the bench, you have Jaylen Clark, who's a draft pick, who has a shot at a rotation spot. And, so you've got, and also Jesse Edwards, who's a two-way player. So you have 7 out of the 10 guys that are going to be on this team's training camp roster, barring something completely unexpected, which is a ton of actual roster players to be played in the Summer League. Complete contrast to last year. Usually it's somewhere in between where you've got 1 or 2 draft picks, maybe a two-way guy. The Wolves have 7 guys, which speaks to a couple of things. Number one, the young talent that is so deep on this roster. And I wouldn't I wouldn't say it's overall roster depth for the Timberwolves because for the most part, these guys don't have a ton of NBA experience. But it speaks to what they're trying to do from a player development standpoint. 7 of the top 8 rotation players from last year are back. And Joe Ingles slots into that 8th spot. And now you're talking about who are those final couple rotation spots? Well, one's going to be Rob Dillingham. The other's likely going to be Terrence Shannon Jr., the other first-round pick from this year, Josh Minott, or Jaylen Clark's got a shot at it. But the point is, they know, like, Nickeil Alexander-Walker almost is for sure gone next year. He's going to be a free agent. He's going to make more than $4 million next year, barring something completely unexpected. And down the road, the roster may need to be shuffled a little bit, whether it's, somebody in the rotation may need to be traded because of salary issues. You've also only got a couple years left of Naz Reid if you don't trade him. And maybe you try and resign him, but then you got to trade. Like, looking down the road, and we don't have to deal with all this now. We're not going to. But I say all that because it's important that there's this much talent, young talent, that isn't necessarily going to have to, more than 2 of these guys aren't going to have to play tomorrow for the Timberwolves. They're not going to have to play in October in a regular season game for the Timberwolves. But the Wolves need to bring them along for when it is time. Like Naz Reid's a great example. He started as a undrafted summer league signing, then a 2-way, then converted into a partially guaranteed contract. And now he's got a big contract. Jordan McLaughlin, who's of course no longer with the organization, signed with the Kings last week. He's another example of somebody who got his start with the Wolves in summer league. So these things can develop. And those guys were both undrafted. I mean, obviously, Terrence Shannon and Rob Dillingham being first-round picks, but Leonard Miller, a second-round pick, Minott, a second-round pick, Jaylen Clark, a second-round pick. So all that to say, that's what's so impressive. Like, you look at some of these other rosters, that Pelicans roster that the Wolves faced on Friday, there wasn't much on that roster in terms of, besides Jordan Hawkins, of like legit NBA talent, or at least guys that when you look at their rotation during the game, like, oh, I know who that guy is. There wasn't a whole lot of that. Wasn't a whole lot of it from the Pacers roster either, frankly, on Sunday. I like Enrique Freeman a lot off the bench for them. And of course, Johnny Furphy, their first rounder, who I thought there was a chance the Wolves would take Furphy. Actually, no. Did he end up being an early second rounder? I think he was an early second rounder. Anyway, all that to say, the Timberwolves should do well in this tournament. And I said last week, I thought that there were a couple guys in particular, Terrence Shannon being one of them. And I think I said Nadir Haifi, the French, what is he, 21 years old? French Algerian, guard who was just cut from the French national team that I spent a lot of time last week talking about him. I thought those two were suited really well for Summer League, and they are. But what we're already seeing from this Timberwolves team is far more effort defensively than I remember ever seeing from any Summer League team. And Chris Finch said in the press conference after, when they were introducing the rookies about how Vegas Summer League is some of the toughest what did he call it? Toughest competition level, or toughest competition, or tightly contested, something like that. Because all these guys are playing for their NBA lives, except for the Wolves have 7 guys who are on the roster. Like, they wouldn't necessarily, like, obviously they want to put their best foot forward. And like Jesse Edwards is trying to show that, hey, I could play in the league. There's a reason you gave me a 2-way. And, Josh Minott is trying to win a rotation spot. But these guys have a spot on a team. You look at a lot of the guys on the Pelicans and the Pacers, and even some of the guys on the Wolves at the end of their Summer League rotation, who are trying to prove that they can stick in the league. So, of course, it's going to be tough competition, even if it's not the smoothest basketball, and the half court is very sloppy, and there's a lot of broken transition plays and a lot of fouls, a ton of fouls on Sunday's game, or in Sunday's game. It's still going to be tightly contested basketball, and that's the point here. And the Timberwolves are proving that defensively. I don't remember seeing defense, not just effort level, but also the technique and the actual execution of the defense like this in Summer League ever, really. And the Wolves are doing that. They're putting their best foot forward defensively, looking every bit like the actual Timberwolves from the playoffs. From, Tim Legler said it in the ESPN broadcast in Friday's game against the Pelicans. It looks like game 2 of the Denver Nuggets series, when the Wolves absolutely shut down Denver in Denver, took control of that series initially. Of course, Denver came all the way back, but that's what this looked like for stretches, both in game 1 and game 2 of Summer League. Very impressive. All right, let's get into some individual players. We'll, of course, talk about all those 7 guys I just mentioned. That'll be where the focus is. We'll talk a little, especially about Nadir Haifi. I want to talk about him as well. So we'll get to all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But of course, now we don't have any more playoff sports, no more playoff hockey, no more playoff basketball. It's just WNBA regular season, and well, now actually this week it's the MLB All-Star break. So home run derby tonight, All-Star game tomorrow, but no real sports besides the WNBA this week. And in June and in July and in parts of August, the sports are not sportsing like we want them to. We'll at least have the Olympics here in a couple of weeks. But in the meantime, FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers, not just new customers, all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. You do that right now. Again, Olympics are soon, and then we get into preseason NFL, and we're not too far off. 2 months away from training camps for NBA. It's coming quick. So head on over to FanDuel.com. Make the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Do you watch Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? If so, no doubt you have to turn down the volume because of all the shouting. Instead, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's get into some individual players and what they did. The number one thing that stuck out to me over the first two games, like the number one thing overall, and there's a lot I'm going to get to. We'll talk about Terrence Shannon. We'll talk about Dillingham. The number one thing is Jaylen Clark. And on Friday, I tried to get out in front of thinking about all the rust that he was going to show. And I said something to the effect of, I think he'll be really good defensively, but if he doesn't look great on either end of the floor, we have to give him some grace. The dude hasn't played in 14 months. He tore his Achilles. He hasn't played pro basketball at all, other than some G League practices at the end of the season this year. And he was just cleared for full contact over the weekend, like a week ago, before practice for this. And for stretches, certainly on Sunday in game 2 against the Pacers, Jaylen Clark looked like the best player on the floor, legitimately. And I know he didn't shoot the ball well in game 1, but like that's to be expected. He wasn't an offensive player at UCLA either. The offense came along here in game 2. I'm not expecting anything out of Jaylen Clark offensively. Like if you go back and look at what I said about him after the draft, I actually think I have it. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Yeah. So what I said about Jaylen Clark after the draft is he was, there were some similarities to a guard version of Josh Minott defensively. He has a nose for the ball, outstanding off and on the ball. He was the best point of attack defender in the NCAA that year. And he's not an outstanding athlete. He's not as athletic as Minott. But he's polished defensively. And I know I'm comparing the two, but that's just because that's the type of player that it looks like Tim Conley is looking for in the second round. But Jaylen Clark as a guard, as a wing, 6'5" with a 6'9" wingspan, he's a fantastic rebounder. His defensive IQ is awesome. His shot doesn't look great. He didn't have a good free throw percentage in college. There's some concern about what he could do offensively. I wasn't even sure coming out of college that he was going to be as good. I threw in my post when they drafted him scouting report. I wasn't sure he'd be much better offensively than Josh Okogie. Now we've seen him play for 2. And again, just comparing him to another former Timberwolves player who's an outstanding defender, who, by the way, got a nice contract from Phoenix after playing on a minimum. He just got a 2-year, $14 million, I think, deal with Phoenix. Okogie did. But now we're only 2 summer league games in. But if he plays like he did against the Pacers, I mean, that's great. He had 1 3-point attempt. It was a wide open catch and shoot corner 3, knocked it down. 4 or 5 shooting, got out in transition, ended up scoring 9 points. 9 points, 6 steals on Sunday for Jaylen Clark, 2 rebounds and an assist and a block. In the first game of Summer League, Jaylen Clark was only 1 of 9 shooting, had 2 points, but he had 4 rebounds and 3 steals, missed his 2 3-point attempts. So that's exactly, it was his first pro game ever. First game period in 14, 16, something like that months. And he was 1 of 9. But then he turns around next game out, 4 of 5 on Sunday. Defensively, though, 9 steals across 2 games. And only, there were a couple that were kind of gambly, but I don't think he ever gambled and missed. I never noticed him gambling and missing. over the course of these 2 games. It was like a cornerback perfectly baiting a quarterback in football, knowing exactly the cushion to give, shooting the gap, getting the steal, heading back the other way. And he on-ball steals too. We saw on-ball steals. We saw block shots. Again, a block on Monday. I'm surprised he only had one, actually. I think a couple of those were effectively blocks and steals, and they went down as steals because he was just stripping the ball from guys. He had some weak side steals where he stuck up on guys. He stuck up on a big who was trying to do a dribble handoff at the top of the arc. He did it in every way. I was endlessly impressed with Jaylen Clark, and he looked every bit the part of an NBA rotation player. I think he's going to get some shots early on this season as a 10th, 11th guy, end of quarter situation. We need another point of attack defender out there. But if he plays like this, and I'm not at all suggesting he's going to average 4.5 steals if given significant run at the NBA level, but if he plays like this at the NBA level, you cannot keep him off the floor. Legitimately on Sunday, he was the best player on the floor in the game against the Pacers for long stretches in the game. Very, very impressive. And of any player, like, if I were to look at this at the Wolves Summer League roster and say, what skills on this roster translate to the NBA? I would say Jaylen Clark's defense is number one. And then Dillingham's ability to get a shot off / handles clearly next. And then I'd probably say Terrence Shannon transition / getting to the free throw line. Those things are all NBA ready skills that are plug and play. And again, I go back to my first point on today's show. It's very rare you have plug and play NBA skills in Summer League because the whole point is you're developing guys that aren't ready to play at the NBA level. And all 3 of those guys are going to see rotation level minutes this season. So Jaylen Clark, to me, most impressive. Before we get to the rookies, we'll do that next. I want to give some love to Daishen Nix. I think overall, I was maybe most impressed, and I don't take back anything I said about Daishen Nix last week. Before they re-signed him to a 2-way, I talked about, I don't know why they would do it other than vibes. He's a high volume scorer, but not super efficient. And then when they did re-sign him, and I was previewing Summer League last week, I said basically the same thing, but I gave some of his G League numbers last year. He shot under 40% in the G League last year from the field, not from 3. Inconsistent defensively. And I just, other than vibes and the fact that he's a big guard, I wasn't really sure what the thought process was with bringing him back. And he's been really good in Summer League. Now, he should be. He's bigger than most of the guys out there. He's got more experience. The dude he started some games for the Rockets for 2 straight years. He played a ton of pro basketball at the NBA level. Probably as much actual NBA game experience as almost anybody, at least anybody playing significant minutes in this Vegas Summer League. So he should be doing well. But I've been very impressed with Daishen Nix. At times, he's a little, I don't want to say shot happy. Nadir Haifi is the most shot happy guy on the team. We'll talk about him. But I don't know. I've been impressed with Daishen Nix. In the first game, he had 14, 5, and 4, shot 4 of 7, 1 of 2 outside the arc, 5 of 6 at the line. He had 3 steals in game 1 against the Pelicans. Game 2, he had 16 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 of 9 shooting, 7 of 12 at the line. He got the line 12 times, 1 of 3 outside the arc. So it's a little bit more of the high. Game 1, I guess 4 of 7 is pretty efficient. As it turns out, 14 points on 7 shots is very efficient. Game 2, 16 points on 9 shots. That's fine. But he also missed 5 free throws. So it's exactly what you'd expect, maybe a little bit more efficient. And I think the size helps him quite a bit. But I think for the most part, he's pushing the right buttons. He's pushing and pulling on the pace at the right time. And maybe a little bit on the aggressive side, but it's Summer League. And the Wolves have been, clearly harping on wanting to play faster. Chris Finch said it on the broadcast on, I think it was Friday's game. He said we wanted to get faster. Our team speed is what we wanted to address. Obviously, Dillingham does that. Terrence Shannon does that. Daishen Nix doesn't look like a track star out there, but he can push the pace, and he's happy to play fast. I don't know. He's obviously not a rotation player. I've said this before. He played 1 game in the rotation last year when Conley was out, and I think McLaughlin was out. They were very shorthanded. It was at Utah, I believe. Other than that, they never bothered to really activate him, or when they did play him, even when they were shorthanded. But hey, this version of Daishen Nix, the way he plays is just kind of like, I'm going to throw all my cares out the window and I'm just going to go out there. And there's value in that. It can be a little careless at times, but he's talented enough as a scorer and a big enough body that I was really impressed. And so I got to give kudos to Daishen Nix for being as good as he has been through the first 2 games, and I don't want to take anything away from him. And I want to qualify it with, well, he should. And I wanted to set it up with like, he should, but that doesn't take anything away from him. Because if it doesn't play well, then we're like, well, he's got to be better in summer league. And if he does, it can't be just because it's summer league. You got to, it's just like playing bad teams. You got to play who's in front of you. This is the opportunity Daishen Nix has been given, and he's been really, really good through 2 games. Love to see him put together a complete summer league and have a shot at the all Vegas team or whatever they call it at the end of it. Like he's been really, really impressive. I think the decision making's been good. All right, let's close by talking Dillingham, Terrence Shannon Jr., a couple other quick thoughts, but we'll have some more time on Tuesday's show. The Wolves don't play again until Tuesday evening, I believe. So Tuesday's show, we'll do some additional takeaways, set you up for the final 2 games of the the preliminary round portion of Vegas. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, so let's talk about the rookies, who, of course, are the headliners. Let's start with Terrence Shannon Jr. because he was so good in Friday's game, and I thought he was still actually pretty good on Sunday, even though the numbers are significantly less gaudy. He had 25 points in Friday's game, 9 of 14 shooting, 1 of 4 outside the arc, 6 of 8 at the line, 3 rebounds, 2 blocks, and a lot of the damage was done early. It was done in transition. He had the poster dunk early, and that was super impressive. I'm going to pull up my notes specifically from Friday's game. But the poster dunk early was awesome. His understanding in transition, I talked about that being I talked about this last week and then again already today. One of the primary reasons why Terrence Shannon was such a good pick for Minnesota and why they went after him was because of his ability in transition. Also early in the game 1 on Friday, he had a really nice catch and shoot 3, which is a skill set that's going to be super important. And he was more of a volume 3-point shooter. The percentage was around what would be league average at the NBA level. So it was fine. He's not like, when I say volume, it's not in a bad way. It's a little bit like Anthony Edwards. Ant's 3-point percentage isn't outstanding. He's just really good off the dribble compared to others shooting off the dribble. It's a tough shot to make. He's good off the dribble, get his shot off from anywhere, unlimited range. And he shoots a ton of threes. Ant does, although he shot less this year. But the percentage is fine. He's not a sharpshooter. He's not Cat, right? Terrence Shannon's kind of similar in that regard, where he's going to shoot a lot of threes and he'll make enough that he's keeping the defense honest. You have to respect it. So hitting a catch and 3 shot early in his first pro game was nice to see. He had the poster dunk, he had a really nice block right after that. One of his 2 blocks was early on there. And then as the game went on, he had a pick 6 at one point. He had 1 steal that turned into, I think, a dunker layup for him. Just really impressive all the way around and looked the part. I mean, the first thing I've been saying when asked about Terrence Shannon, I've said it on the show a couple times. I said it when I talked last week to Locked On Illini. I said it when I talked on Locked On NBA a couple weeks ago. Is his NBA body, or he has an NBA ready body. He looks the part. Chris Finch said it in his on-air interview during the game Friday that he hits first on offense. He runs into the defense and forces them to foul him. And that's a skill. His finishing through contact will need a little bit of work, even though he's got the NBA body. That's touch at the rim. So one of the things I mentioned as a concern for him as a prospect when I was evaluating him before the draft was his percentage at the rim is not outstanding, but it's because he's looking to draw contact. And there's a balance there. And part of that is, like, he's already good at it because he's a 5-year college player and he's got the NBA body, but he's going to continue to improve his touch at the rim. He's a good enough shooter from everywhere else that he should be able to improve that and also understand, like, when do I not need to try and draw contact to just finish, just make the shot. If they foul me, they foul me. If not, I'm going to make my layup or make my dunk. And when is the time to go directly into the body of the defender and draw a foul? That's a skill he's going to need to grow on. I thought his second game was almost every bit as impressive. He started a little bit more slowly offensively, but as the game went on, he was drawing fouls left and right. 19 points on 6 of 11 shooting, 7 of 8 at the line. Only 1 3-point attempt and he missed it. 4 rebounds, 3 blocks, 2 steals, 2 assists in the game. So combined, he had 5 stocks on Sunday. He had 3 on Friday, so 8 stocks across the 2 games. Jaylen Clark might have had 9 steals across 2 games, but Terrence Shannon, very impressed with what he was doing. There were a couple instances where he tried a little too hard, but that's summer league. That's these guys get the ball in their hands. That's what this turns into is ISO, just jack the 3, whatever. And for the most part, the Wolves did a pretty good job of avoiding some of that. And Terrence Shannon, really, really good. So between the 2 games, 25 points on 14 shots on Friday, 19 points on 11 shots on Sunday. And just again, clearly somebody with more experience, 5 years of experience at the collegiate level, NBA body, can do a little bit of everything. And I was impressed with his half-court scoring as well, which is not something he's going to be asked to do a ton of with the Wolves, but he could do it. Very impressed with Terrence Shannon, and we'll talk a lot more about him as the week goes on. Rob Dillingham, the efficiency was not there for Dillingham, but I wasn't concerned, and I said this actually on Friday's show. I said, let's not be concerned either way with Rob Dillingham. We know what he could do. On Friday, he shot just 2 of 12, 0 of 5 outside the arc. He did have 5 assists and 0 turnovers. That's important to point out. He had 5 rebounds as well. In Sunday's game, Dillingham had 14 points, but it took him 14 shots to do it. He started hot. He scored 8 points in the first couple minutes of the game. 2 of 4 outside the arc, and one of those makes was early. One was a little bit later. He had a couple nice shots off the dribble. 8 assists, only 2 turnovers, 2 rebounds. The feel for Rob Dillingham for me was really important, and I talked about this in the wake of them trading for him on draft night. Was some of the scouting reports out there talked about how they weren't sure about his passing skill for a point guard, for somebody who's barely 6'1" and 164 pounds or whatever. I had no concern with that. I thought he was an underrated passer in college. If guys make the shots that when he passed the ball to him, he would have more assists. He also came off the bench for Kentucky, so that didn't necessarily help there. I think he's a great passer, and that is what stuck out to me across these first 2 games. I'm more excited about that, more positive about that than I would be concerned about the shooting. Across the 2 games, 13 assists, only 2 turnovers. That's going to play for a backup point guard at the NBA level. The shooting, we know he could shoot. He did it. He shot 48% on catch and shoot threes last year on almost 90 attempts at Kentucky. The dude's going to be able to shoot. They may tell him to dial back some of the crazy shot attempts, but not in summer league. Like, this is his time to really be comfortable. Jamal Crawford said something on Sunday's broadcast about him. You can immediately tell he could get wherever he wants on the floor. And that's his number one skill. And he showed that. He just didn't make the shots. And again, the feel and pick and roll, a couple nice passes to Jesse Edwards for dunks were very nice on Sunday. A couple hit-ahead passes in transition, some leave-behind transition passes where he slowed it down and he hit Shannon. I think it was the first game on Friday for a dunk. Very impressed overall with Dillingham's feel and what he did with the ball in his hands. The shots will fall. I'm not super worried about that. We'll get to some of the other guys on Tuesday. I'm running out of time here today, but those are the 4 guys I really wanted to highlight because I was most impressed. Clark, Nix, Dillingham, and Shannon. I want to talk more about Minot, and because he had a nice line on Sunday. He was a little bit less active, or I should say less efficient. He wasn't less active, a little less efficient on Friday. I want to talk about what he's done so far on Tuesday. I want to talk about Jesse Edwards, the 2-way signee for the Wolves. And then let's talk about Nadir Haifi. Nadir Haifi is the guy who I talked up last week as the one non-roster guy I was most intrigued by. And man, he has been he looked like the best player on the floor. If you had just seen his first half of Friday's game, you'd have been like, oh, this Haifi guy, he's a first-round pick, right? Like, legitimately, he was that good. And then all of a sudden, he was jacking up contested, like push shots from 18 feet. And it was like, am I watching like a AAU game right now? It was just complete swing, which is what it's to be expected from somebody who's this young and a pro basketball player who's trying to find his way. It was just cut from Team France. So anyway, I want to talk about Haifi on Tuesday's show. I want to talk about Jesse Edwards. We'll talk a little bit about some of the other guys. We'll talk about Leonard Miller, Josh Minot as well. So we'll get to all those guys, and we'll peek ahead to what to look for Tuesday's show or Tuesday's game, as well as Thursday's game. The Wolves play Tuesday. They play Thursday. They're guaranteed at least a fifth game, But if they go 4-0, they're pretty much guaranteed a spot in the semifinals, which start next Sunday. And that would mean they'd get 2 more games for a total of 6 in Vegas. We'll talk more about that on Tuesday. Otherwise, that's all we have for you today on the show. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.